We build monuments to preserve memory, but over time, they fade into the background. You're left with a multi-ton piece of armor sitting on a concrete pad, slowly weathering in plain sight. Modeling a battle-weary tank is straightforward. You build up layers of mud and field damage. But replicating 30 years of sun-bleached municipal neglect at 1/35th scale, that requires an entirely different technical discipline. This finished M41 is headed to auction, with all the proceeds except for shipping going to the American Legion in Dow City, Iowa to help fund a veterans monument. The catch is, I've never actually built a diorama base before. Doing your first scratch build terrain sequence on a strict deadline for charity is a stellar way to invite disaster. The stock plastic turret looks completely wrong for a parked veteran. Real M41s had a distinct canvas cover over the gun mantlet. To mimic that heavy fabric in 1/35th scale, I'm tearing up ordinary tissues and applying the strips with a crude mix of water and standard Elmer school glue. I carefully stipple the wet paper around the barrel with a coarse brush, using a toothpick to pack the folds into the recessed hatches and grab handles before the PVA sets. If you rush this, it won't look like a weathered canvas. It'll just look like a soggy paper towel stuck to a model. Instead of wasting premium alligator clips or full-size dowels on a dozen identical tank wheels, a cheap coffee stir stick is a perfect shortcut. Splitting them lengthwise gives two narrow, flexible splints. They provide just enough tension to hold the wheels securely during airbrushing without blocking the inner rim. A durable finish requires a flawless foundation, so I'm starting with Mr. Finisher Servicer 1500 Black. I thin it with leveling thinner to achieve a smooth, atomized spray through the airbrush. This black base serves a dual purpose. Beyond providing excellent paint adhesion across the mixed plastic and PVA elements, it acts as an optical pre-shading layer. This high contrast undertone ensures that even when I apply the faded municipal olive drab over the top, the mechanical depth of the Walker Bulldog remains crisp and distinct. A quick brush of tire black on the road wheels, and a coat of gloss varnish, and I'm ready to begin the weathering. This is where I replicate decades of unrelenting weather. I place microdots of white, yellow, and raw umber oil paints directly onto the olive drab panels. Then drag them into streaks with a stiff dry brush to establish the initial mapping of rain and sun bleaching. For the pin wash, I'm switching to Castle Art's raw umber oil paint, diluted down to a thin glaze consistency. Standard armor builds use stark black washes for aggressive contrast, but a municipal monument needs a warmer, dustier tone. Now I'm oil dotting the lower deck and following it up with a light pin wash on the suspension elements and road wheels. The goal isn't to make the tank look greasy or operational. It's about simulating decades of airborne soot, rust runs, and dust that have baked into the crevices. To finish the abandoned monument look, I lightly mist translucent coat of olive drab over the top to blend the technique in. I apply a very light touch of orange rust to the road wheels, which I will blend in later. The turret gets the same oil dot technique. To push the faded effect even further, I'm introducing a unique mechanical texture using a stiff toothbrush lightly dampened with thinner. By scrubbing over the dried oils, the coarse bristles microtexture the paint layer, breaking up the heavy deposits and leaving behind a sun-bleached patina that captures the look of a forgotten park monument. As before, a light translucent coat of olive drab goes over the top to blend everything in. I dry brush tire black across the raised tread surfaces. This highlights the crisp physical details of the tread pattern without making the metal look shiny or functional. It gives the illusion of a heavy steel track that hasn't rotated an inch in decades. A few small white dots scattered across the hall simulate years of bird activity. For the rust blooms around the welds and grab irons, I'm doing things completely backward from a standard armor build. I apply the bright, vivid orange first, followed by the darker, crusty, burnt umber tones on top. In a live combat zone, fresh rust is brighter orange and sits on the surface. But on an abandoned monument, exposed to 30 years of rain, that old deep corrosion is buried at the core. By mapping the bright orange outward first and nesting the dark stagnant rust directly inside of it, I create an optical illusion that makes the corrosion look like it's eating its way out from deep beneath the paint layer. I apply random patterns of streaking grime, then brush them down to represent the breakdown of the upper paint layer on various parts of the tank. To permanently set the tracks, I'm melting the alignment pins to fuse the rubberized links together so they can't separate. Now it's time to lock in our work with a couple coats of ultra matte varnish. After cutting the foam base to size, I cover it with Mod Podge to seal it. Then attach the plastic sheet with a second coat to lock it down. A coat of water-based primer finishes sealing the project. Achieving realistic concrete requires a deliberate push and pull between texture and tone. I started at base with buff, then dragged a light gray drawing stick across the surface to catch the initial surface grain. After sealing that with a misted mid-tone gray and a heavy black wash, I wiped the excess away to leave the dark pigment trapped only in the deepest recesses. To break up the uniformity, I went back in with a second pass of buff and a final randomized pin wash. The real magic happens at the very end. A light pass with 240 grit sanding stick knocks down the high spots, cutting through the top coats to expose the complex, multi-layered grain buried underneath. Scale mud hides a lot of mistakes. Scale concrete shows everything. And this is where the project almost fell apart. In my excitement to use the static grass applicator, I completely botched the order of operations. I flocked, painted, and detailed the entire terrain piece before realizing the raw foam primer edges were still exposed on the sides. It was a classic rookie error that left a messy, ragged boundary where a crisp wood border should be. The rescue mission was pure punishment. I cut the wood veneer panels and glued them to the edge. The veneer of course curled due to the moisture of the glue, so I had to weight it down with books and wait. I got it pretty close, trimmed up the overage, sanded, packed the corners with wood filler to bridge the gaps, sanded again. If you missed it in the beginning, this is my first ever diorama base, and it shows. But this project deserves the time to make it right. Fixing one problem created another. While priming and painting the new wood cladding, I accidentally primed the edge of the finished turf. That triggered a tedious cycle of damage control. That meant masking the fresh wood, repainting the stained grass, and reshading the highlights. Only after pulling away the masking tape did I finally get the clean, professional border the project deserved. With the terrain repaired, it was time to establish the human element and scale. The perimeter barrier relies on miniature posts holding a heavy security cable, which I replicated using lead wire for its natural and realistic drape and weight. I drilled out precise mounting points along the concrete edge, setting the post securely before threading the wire. To anchor the scene story, a weathered keep-off sign was added to the barrier, giving a distinct purpose to the isolated pad. Finally, the figures are pinned and set into place. Their positioning brings the entire scene to life, turning a static block of weathered concrete into a scene with a story. At some point, the real machines stop moving, and we're left trying to figure out how to remember them. For my very first diorama build, I'm incredibly happy with how this scene came together. The eBay listing is linked in the description below. Everything from the sale, except for shipping costs, goes directly to the Dow City, Iowa American Legion to help fund a permanent name monument for local veterans who have passed on. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on Drew's Model Bench.